once again with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you so much for today. Thank you, Lord, that everyone here is here today, Lord. Thank you for bringing them safely. It is always a blessing to see each and every one arrive and have the desire to come, Lord. And I just pray that as we spend today worshiping together, fellowshipping together, and just praising you together, Lord, I just pray that our hearts would be at peace, that our hearts would be focused on you, not be distracted by not just the troubles, but also the pleasures of this world and any of the things that can distract us, Lord. I just pray that our hearts will just be on you today, and that we'd be able to rest in you and rest for the week. And I just pray that whatever we learn today will carry over through the rest of our lives. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. So, for those of you who have been coming to church, with us, here at church, like any other church, we come here and we talk a lot about the Bible and about God every Sunday. But as you all know, the Bible is huge. It's massive. If you've ever taken a look at a Bible, it can be intimidating to look at. There are just, so many books, so many chapters, and, some of the books have an enormous amount of chapters, like the book of Psalms, and overall, the book just takes quite a while to just read through the whole thing, and of course, it takes even longer to discuss it, if we were to discuss the whole Bible. So, throughout the past year and a half, ever since we started our services together, we've talked about a lot of the many famous people of the Bible. So we've talked about Jesus. Jesus is a big topic for Christians. We've talked about Adam and Noah and Moses and David, Job, Elijah, and the list goes on and on and on, on and on and on. We've just been, talking about so many different famous figures of the Bible. But one thing that's been kind of bugging me for a while is that we just haven't had the chance to really talk about Daniel. And it's a really it's a story that's everyone should know. So here it is. Today we'll be revisiting an old Bible classic. One of these stories that you've probably heard a billion times if you ever been in Sunday school as a kid. But of course is no less important for us, regardless of any age, as we mature in age and in Christ. So this is our story of Daniel and the lion's den. And so we're just going to kind of going through it a little bit. And the story is kind of a long one, and we're not going to read the whole thing, but we're going to still kind of just jump right in today and get started with the reading. And this particular story of Daniel and the lion's den, begins in Daniel chapter 6. And so we're just going to start by first reading the first 4 verses. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them, so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself from all among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. So here we go. This is our introduction of the story of Daniel and the lion's den. And if you ever read the book of Daniel in the previous chapter, it's kind of like a roller coaster. For Daniel's life is kind of like a roller coaster. In the very beginning, he's exiled from his country, and so he's carried off to the Babylonians. And there he has to learn how to become a Babylonian official, and he serves them. Only to later on, their whole empire gets kind of taken down by another empire, and so he used to be part of the officials of another empire, and now this other king Darius, he still likes Daniel, and so he puts Daniel in charge as well. And we see here that Darius, like a lot of the back then, it was empire over empire, and Darius was no different. He had conquered Babylon, and he now built this huge empire. And, with all these empires, how they are way too large for him to control. As a result, as it says here, he divided up the control over the kingdom to 120 satraps, which, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't know how to pronounce, it looks like satraps. But it sounds kind of weird when I say it. But if you don't know what they are, besides the fact that it seems kind of self-explanatory, we're going to consider them just basically governors over a large region. Okay, some translations even call them princes. So just like our country, we got our 50 states, each one has their own governor. This kingdom had 120 to rule 120 separate districts. However, of course, King Darius likes to have lots of layers of rulers, and so he also had 3 administrators that were over all the satraps. And much to our surprise, or at least to my surprise, one of them is Daniel. Now, I say that because it really does seem kind of surprising to me. Like I said, if you follow the story, it doesn't really make any sense. Daniel was one of the leaders of the previous kingdom. And so, loyalty might be kind of an issue, if you think about it. But the top leaders, top three, in control of this country. It makes no sense, and yet here he is. And of course, like many of the leaders in the Bible, we are not to admire Daniel as some amazing man who reached this point in his life through hard work or perhaps some might call it lucky circumstances. But, you know, he achieved his position only by the grace of God. God put him in that place. So if we are to admire him, it should be because of his faith and devotion to God, which God rewarded him with this position. So the king was so impressed by Daniel's ability that, you know, the king didn't just see Daniel as one of the three administrators. It says that the king had planned to set him over the whole kingdom. So he wanted to make him even higher than the other administrators. He was the prime target for a promotion. And the king favored Daniel the most out of all those under his command. But, you know, the drill with the stories kind of like these, you know, if you've read a bunch of them in the Bible. Joseph is another character in the Bible who's really favored, really loved by a lot of the people, even including his father and the leaders. And whoever is in charge of him, they love him so much that they want to promote him. And the same thing happens here. And just like Joseph, if someone is popular and successful, if everyone seems to have something, if that person seems to have everything going their way, then there are bound to be people who are jealous, who are envious. And of course, as we see, this envy can drive people to do very terrible, horrible, and even cruel things. And we see that here. They were trying to drag Daniel down. They just want him out of the picture. Either try to kick him out of his position, or at least to show him in some bad light to their king. But their initial plan was sort of backfiring, because they could not find any charge to bring against him. He was too clean, too good. He was not corrupt in any way. He just was like a good, devoted follower of God. And so they had to come up with a new plan. And so we're going to read that in the next few verses, starting from verse 6 to verse 8. So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, "May King Darius live forever. The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to a god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed." All right, so here they come to the king all together as a group, and they ensnare the king with a lie. The lie was that all the leaders agreed to this ruling. They said the royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed. But of course we know that Daniel, who being one of the top 3 administrators, and even all his friends, they would certainly not have agreed to this. And the king, of course, would never have followed through if he knew that one of his top trusted administrators did not agree to this. But he did not know. And he did not understand their intent. And, you know, for the king to receive this law, I mean, we could also assume that the king might have been blinded by his pride. He just saw, oh, this sounds good to me, and if everyone else agrees, it sounds perfect. So what was their plan? They asked the king to create a law that states that anyone who prays to someone, be they a man or God, except to the one king that they have, Darius, whoever does that will get thrown into the lion's den. So if they can't catch Daniel doing anything bad, well, they just have to flip the whole situation around. They asked to create a law specifically that would bring harm to Daniel, and what a serious consequence it was. And the punishment for breaking this law wasn't years of prison, it was a trip to the den of lions. And of course, this isn't like the zoo, right? You know, it's not like, oh, you're sentenced to look at lions at the zoo. No, this is straight into the den of lions, where the purpose of this den of lions is to eat you, or kill you, or do whatever lions do to people while we're not looking, right? So, practically, when we think about this, it's obvious that the sentence, the true sentence here, is not just a wonderful trip to lion's den, but death. And when it comes to death on this earth, you know, there are many ways to die. Most expect or hope for a natural old age death. Of course, but then, you know, there are other ways that things happen. Some have a fear of being buried alive. I heard one story, a very weird story, on the news, in fact. It's not like a made-up story, where the ground kind of broke out and a hole emerged. And some people, while they were sleeping in bed, the house collapsed into the ground and they were covered. And you know, it can happen. Being buried alive doesn't have to be specifically someone trying to bury you alive. Things can happen like that. But you know, when I think of terrible ways to die, getting eaten sounds like one of the most terrifying ways to die. And so it was, you know, getting thrown into the lion's den doesn't sound like that great. And so verse 10, 11, we're going to continue reading here. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened up towards Jerusalem. And 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Then these men went up as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. All right, so when we come to Daniel and the lion's den, this verse 10 specifically, is what I want our main focus for to be today. You know, when he heard about the decree, when Daniel heard about the decree, what did he do?
Pray.
He went to pray. Yes, exactly. He said, basically he heard, oh, okay, so there's a law that says if I pray to any god, I'm going to get thrown into the lion's den. And so he goes home and immediately starts praying. All right. So as you know, as I think about this, I'm just thinking, what is going on in his mind? Seriously. Like, Daniel's response is truly amazing to me because, for one, the law made him want to pray even more. It says specifically, when he heard this law, he went home to pray. So it did not scare him away from praying. And two, the other strange thing about this is that, you know, it would have been so easy for him to avoid breaking this law. The other officials knew what they were doing when they created this law. They knew Daniel because they must have been studying him, trying to figure out what makes him tick. And they knew what they were doing. They didn't create this law to scare Daniel away from praying. They did it because they knew, without a doubt, that Daniel would never stop praying. Now, why did I say that this law is so easy to avoid? Well, think about it. The first thing that makes this law pretty easy to avoid was, well, the law was only for 30 days. Okay, this wasn't a lifetime law. This wasn't like, okay, you can't pray to anyone ever. Only 30 days. So what is 30 days to you, right? What is it a long time for you? You know, as I look back at life, all I'm reminded of is that, you know, time really flies. You know, sometimes when you're waiting for something to happen, like a big event, a big holiday, you know, it's a month away, and you're thinking, oh man, that thing is coming, and you keep thinking about it every single day, but eventually that day is going to come. And it comes quicker than you feel, quicker than you think. I mean, just as thinking about what we're meeting here, you know, sort of feels like, I don't know, for me it feels like it's kind of been a while. I feel like we've been meeting here for a while, but in reality it's only been 2 months. We've just been here for 2 months, and it feels like we kind of got into the groove of things already. This place feels a bit familiar, and everything just feels kind of like, we've been here for maybe half a year, but no, it's only been 2 months. I don't know what the deal is with that, but time just flies, especially when you've got a routine. As you kind of go through each day, you just keep doing your thing, keep living your life. If you got school or work or whatever you do, or hobbies, before you know it, a day has gone by, a week has gone by, a month has gone by, and in the end, after you think about it, once you reach that point, the 30 days doesn't seem like all that much. I mean, a year sounds like a lot. 2 years sound like a lot. But a month? If I told you to stop doing something for 30 days, besides, the vital aspects of life, like breathing and eating and drinking and sleeping, if I told you to stop doing anything else, you could probably do it. If I said, don't run for 30 days, just walk, I'm sure you could do it. If I said, don't do anything fun for 30 days, you might be able to do it, but you probably won't be all that happy. If I said, don't talk to anybody for 30 days, well, some people do that. Some people have done that. If you go, some people, they go to school and they don't even say a word. There are a lot of things that you can kind of just skip out on, without kind of really ruining your life in any way. Your life may be rather inconvenient if you had to skip out on some of these things. It could be kind of complicated, but I bet you all could do it. And with enough motivation or incentive provided, of course. I mean, if I asked you to do something so drastic, certainly you must want something in return. But regardless, I think you could do it. But Daniel couldn't. Daniel couldn't and wouldn't stop praying. That's because to him, the act of prayer was vital. I mean, just look at how many times he prays. The verse said he prayed 3 times a day. He got down on his knees and prayed 3 times a day. So, that's a good number. 3 times. It's not a lot. It's not a huge number. But it was enough for him. I mean, if you think about how many times, like, certain prayers, certain religions force you to pray, certain religions have either 3 or 5 times a day that you have to have certain schedule that you have to pray during these times. Of course, Christianity, even Judaism doesn't specifically have something like that. It's a matter of when you want to pray. But for us, for Daniel at least, he had this schedule. He always prayed 3 times a day. Now, what does that remind you of? 3 times a day. Well, that reminds me of a pretty standard schedule for eating. When we talk about the meals that we have, most people usually have things like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. At least in the U.S. Now, I know some people don't eat breakfast. Some people skip it. Maybe it's just too early in the morning. Maybe their stomachs and their minds are just not awake yet, and they feel like they could, hold out until lunch. Or maybe it's like some sort of diet. I'm missing 1 meal of a day. But I remember seeing a report that they said that people who don't eat breakfast, they actually end up eating more at night, like for a midnight snack or something. So it sort of balances out in the end. People who skip a meal end up eating another meal that they don't consider a meal. And so, and it's in our country, it's pretty popular to eat at night, in fact. I mean, we have diners and fast food places that go late into the night, maybe even 24 hours. I remember when we used to have youth group Friday nights, and 10, 11 o'clock, Billy would take us and we'd go to IHOP and have some waffles or pancakes and whatever. So people eat any time of the day, and so but from the way that we've determined as a society, the human body seems to be most satisfied by 3 full meals a day. That's what we generally feel. I mean, we can kind of stretch that out a bit, or kind of shrink that down a bit, but 3 meals is more of the standard. And so we can compare that with Daniel's routine. He was praying as though it was a necessity. He was praying like it was as vital as eating food. He did not want to miss a single time of prayer. He was devoted to praying 3 times a day, every single day. People are creatures of habit. Once in a while, you might meet somebody who just loves to be spontaneous and just do whatever they can, like on the spot. I don't know if you ever met someone like that. There are people like that out there, but generally, I like to think that people are generally creatures of habit. We do things in a routine. We kind of settle in things, and we kind of do things similar way every single time. You know, we don't try to just do things different just for the heck of it. So we have our routines. We do things the way we're accustomed to doing it, and you know, ultimately this creates good habits and bad habits. And of course, Daniel realized the importance of creating a good habit for prayer, because even though Daniel viewed prayer like food, prayer is ultimately not like food. I mean, if you go without food, if you try to like hold out, right now, even right now, maybe some of you your stomachs are reminding you that it's almost time for lunch. You know, it's coming. It's coming. Maybe half an hour, maybe an hour, but you will soon be able to eat, and your stomach is telling you right now that it's almost time. And maybe it's even changing your mind a bit, maybe distracting you a bit. And so with food, you know, we have, even if we try to avoid it, eventually we're not going to want to avoid it because it's just going to be a struggle for us. But with prayer, you know, it's different. You could go a day without praying, and there's just no physical reminder of that prayer. So what Daniel was doing here, praying 3 times a day, it was not just something that was natural. It's not natural for people to create a schedule to pray every single day. It was something he worked at. It was what people call a spiritual discipline. It was a discipline for him because ultimately he did consider it important. It did not have the same effect as food in terms of reminding him, but it had the same importance as food. And so he could not go a month, much less a day, without prayer. And the other thing I want to say about Daniel's prayer, and this is what makes this thing pretty amazing, is that Daniel did not also change the way he prayed. We talked about prayer in the past. We've had lessons and Bible studies and messages on prayer. And one of the nice things about prayer that we have as Christians is the flexibility of it. You know, we always talk about, man, you can pray however you want, you know. There's no specific one way to pray. We have the Lord's Prayer as an example, but it's just an example. You don't have to always pray with the Lord's Prayer. You can pray on your knees, you can pray outside or inside, you can pray the Lord's Prayer, or you can just talk to God informally. Some of the great preachers of the past, some of them, you know, they just talk to God like God was their friend, you know. So you can pray aloud, or even in a whisper, or even in the comfort of your own mind. There's no specific one way to pray. So if Daniel, for a month, 30 days, if he just, sat somewhere, closed his eyes, prayed in his own mind, they would not be able to accuse him of anything. They could just be looking at him, and he could technically be taking a nap. They wouldn't know whether he's taking a nap or whether he's praying. He would be able to pray as many times as he wanted to, but he did not do that. He chose to stick with the same way he always prayed, knowing fully well that it would get him into trouble. He would not be ashamed to pray. He would not be afraid to pray. He would just pray. And before we wrap up the story of Daniel, I'm going to quickly summarize the middle of it, because like I said, I don't want to read the whole story here. It's a story you've all have read before. So, but in case some may not in case some need a reminder, what happened was, so they created a law, and just like we read, they find Daniel praying just as before. And so they go to the king immediately and tell him about it. Maybe not in the way that everyone expects. The king was really greatly distressed over the news that Daniel had done this. Not because he didn't like the fact that Daniel was praying to another god, but only because he was genuinely concerned over Daniel. He didn't want Daniel to get hurt or die. But the law could not be changed. It was kind of, sometimes we think, oh, the king can do whatever he wants, but in this empire at least, once the laws were set by the king could not change the law. And so Daniel had to be thrown into the lion's den. And even though they had to go through with this, the king did not approve of this at all, and it said that as soon as he heard about this, he tried whatever he could to try to get Daniel out of this mess. But no matter what he did, the law was final. And so all he could do was hope for Daniel to be safe. And we'll finish up the reading by reading verses 19 to 24. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel answered, "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. All right. Brutal. The ending gets a little brutal there, but at least before that, we get to see a happy ending for Daniel, at least. Like I said, though, ending's not that happy for the people that tried to kill him in the first place, but Daniel gets the happy ending as the hero of the story, as the one who is faithful to God. God protected Daniel from the lions, and we see that it's not like those lions were, they were not like they were really lazy lions or lethargic or really full or from their previous meal. No, they're ready. They were ready to go, but God protected Daniel. And those who saw what happened would surely believe in the living God after they saw what happened to the others who were not protected. Like I said in the beginning, this is one of those stories in the Bible that is adapted for children in children's books and cartoons. I remember watching cartoons, and we also have for my nieces and nephews little children's books that contain the story with nice little cute drawings of lions and things like that. And it's talked about a lot in Sunday school as well. It's a very inspiring story. It's a very interesting story. And we see a man of faith be redeemed and saved on account of his faith. We also see a miracle that is very unique in the Bible. This is the only time where we see lions hold out, on eating someone. So while all of that is amazing, today, just, like I said before, the focus of today's story, I don't want to focus on the lion's den, like most people when they talk about Daniel and the lion's den, the focus is more on the lion's den. What I want to really focus on is the prayer that Daniel had in the middle of the story, where it doesn't seem like the climax, yet it's so vital because it's everything. We talked about, last week about how important the word of God is. We talked about how, we should try to build a good habit with reading the Word of God. But today I'm here to point out another equally important aspect of spiritual life, and that is prayer. What got Daniel into this mess was also the very same thing that got him out of it. So how do you view prayer? what is prayer to you? Some people find prayer weird. You know, some might think, oh, it's kind of like talking to yourself. Or maybe it's just something you're afraid or ashamed to do in public because, not everyone does it. And some people feel like they need to hide that they pray. And like I said, when people pray in schools or in other places, they might just, we have that flexibility, just close your eyes and just say your prayer quietly in your own mind. Is that how you view prayer? Is it also something that you feel like you could live without? Is prayer something you can kind of skip easily, Like we can't skip food easily, but we can skip prayers oh so easily. And to that point, I think it might be something that some people, or maybe even a lot of people, don't do at all. But for you, if you want to know God and trust God, like Daniel, if you want to put your hope in Him and have the relationship with Him, like Daniel, if you want to experience the power of God and the assurance of God in your life, like Daniel, for all the circumstances that come your way, then we have to view prayer the same way that Daniel viewed it. So let's, challenge ourselves. If you don't view prayer the same way that Daniel views it, let's challenge ourselves to treat prayer the same way that he did, to view prayer the same way that he did. Let's challenge ourselves to treat it like meals of a day, something that we just can't live without, something that we got to do every single day. Because as Daniel viewed it, to him, prayer was irreplaceable. It was not to be skipped, and it was a vital part of life. And with that said, let's get into prayer. Let's end with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you so much for today. Once again, I just want to come to you today and thank you so much, Lord, for all that you've done. We have a lot of experiences in this life, and it can be good and it can be bad, and we're going to experience troubles, and we're going to have good times, and Lord, in everything that happens to us, Lord, whether good or bad, I just pray, Lord, that we would remember to always be able to turn to you in prayer, Lord. We have your word, we have prayer, you have given us all that we need in order to have that relationship with you, that personal relationship. And I just pray, Lord, that we would seek it, that we would hunger for it, Lord, that we would be desperate for you, Lord, and for all that you can, for all that you are, Lord. Not just what you do, Lord, but just who you are, our God, our Lord, in our lives, and just lead us on the paths of righteousness, Lord, for your name's sake, as we continue to live our lives in this world that seems to be failing, Lord. A lot of darkness, a lot of troubles, terrorism and war, Lord, and people are turning away from you. And I just pray, Lord, that like Daniel, we would have that faith, that devotion, never turn away from you, Lord, never forget you for all that you do, Lord. I just pray, Lord, that you also deliver us when we get in trouble, and just teach us to rejoice when things are going well as well. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.